What is the greatest problem of today's world? Is it climate change, growth of global populism, fake news, or risk of terrorism? There is one pattern beneath the surface of all of these great global threats, which makes everything even worse. It is the certainty of one's own opinion. This certainty often leads to the inability of critical thinking and rational argumentation. The core of this bias is the so-called Dunning-Kruger effect. In simplicity, this effect could be expressed in the graph. On the horizontal axis, there is knowledge, and on the vertical axis, the degree of self-certainty. The less knowledge, the higher the confidence. And this peak is quite a significant problem. For someone, it is enough to read a few articles about vaccination, and he becomes the greatest expert in the subject. And during the Olympic Games, everyone becomes the best coach, or during the election, everyone becomes a professional political scientist. After the first peak, however, with increasing knowledge, the level of certainty decreases. One begins to see that things are not black and white, and that they are far more complicated than it seemed at the first sight. Education leads to humility. After reaching a certain amount of knowledge and becoming an expert, one's confidence starts to increase again. But it will never reach the level at which it was at the beginning. Charles Darwin said it very simply: ignorance more than frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. Bernard Russell, the Nobel Prize winner, went even further. He said the whole problem in the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people are so full of doubts. This phenomenon has attracted researchers David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger. They took a group of students and tested them in several independent domains: grammar, sense of humor, and logical reasoning. In the second step, they let them evaluate how they thought they performed. Almost all students rated above average on a scale 1 to 10, somewhere around 6 to 7. Furthermore, it uncovered two important trends. The worse they were, labeled as incompetent in the study, the more they overestimated themselves. On the other hand, those who were competent tend to underestimate themselves. One explanation for this is that if someone is competent, they expect the same level of skills from the others, and therefore they evaluate themselves worse. But another part of the experiment was even more interesting. Participants were confronted with their results and asked again to conduct a self-assessment. For those competent, it has led them to evaluate correctly and objectively. For what happened with the incompetent ones? Nothing. The conclusion of the study is: incompetent people tend to overestimate themselves very highly. The second problem is that it is impossible to explain to them that they were incompetent. If someone is unable to use logic, you cannot use logical argumentation to explain to him that he cannot think logically. If you have ever tried to explain to a stupid person in an online discussion that he is stupid, you already know that it is impossible. The last important conclusion is that the only way to fight the Dunning-Kruger effect is increasing one's knowledge. By increasing one's competence, he can be able to acknowledge that he did not understand something enough at the beginning. And at the same time, it is essential to teach people humbleness. Have you noticed this effect with others? In an internet discussion, on social media? It is always important to admit that all of us are subject to this effect and that we need to ask ourselves how we can avoid it. So therefore, we have these 5 tips for you. Wisdom means to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, or I was wrong. Humility is a virtue, while certainty is often a symbol of ignorance. Develop your knowledge. Educate yourself. Be curious. The more you understand the subject, the less you will be succumbed to non-objectivity. Watch out for confirmation bias. People tend to look for information that confirms their views. For greater objectivity, the opposite procedure is better. First, examine arguments on both sides, and only after form your opinion. Do not fight while arguing. Do not use argumentation fouls, and definitely do not insult others. On the other hand, approach the other side with respect and slowly try to help them understand the complexity of things. Search for the truth together. Always admit that you can be wrong, and always acknowledge that you might be subject to the Dunning-Kruger effect yourself. As Václav Havel said, follow those who seek the truth, but run away from those who have found it. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube and social networks. And in order to make the world a little better place, please share this video with as many people as possible.